Everyone is disrupted in life. We all are. But some of us choose to be positive disruptors who use that disruption for progress and innovation and growth. And I think I would tell people that you've got that person within you too.
Mm.
The world needs you. So go disrupt for good.
Hello and welcome to Quick Before You Forget. Today, I am so excited and so grateful to be here with Patrick Leddin, leadership expert, former Army officer, professor, and Wall Street Journal and New York Times best-selling author. Patrick studies what happens when the ground shifts beneath you and how leaders don't just survive disruption, but they use it to grow stronger and change the world for good. If you've ever felt like plans fell apart and you weren't sure what to do next, this conversation is going to meet you right there. Today, we're here to learn from Patrick's story. Patrick, what that looks like is walking a bit through your past, present, and future together. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready. Let's do it, Ty.
Yay. So let's go back to the past, first of all. Who is somebody that in your childhood left a lasting impact on who you are today?
Well, actually, when I was growing up, I grew up in Chicago or the south side of Chicago. There's a few people I could think over the course of time who left an impact. I did this thing called marching drum and bugle corps as a kid because I was a trumpet player. And we would spend our summers, marching one town after another, like competitively type of thing. And there was an instructor named Don who left a lasting impact on me. Don passed away sadly last year, but I tried to stay in contact with him. And he was just a guy who would not accept anything but your best. And I really appreciated that. There was a fair amount of yelling at us that happened over the years when we would march with him, and lots of long days and not enough water breaks. But definitely learned so much from Don. And he was a guy who didn't really get paid anything to do that thing. He just poured himself into it.
What's one of the things that you learned from him that applies to something that you do today? Like what's something that stands out?
I think Don would just be the type of guy and who would say, I can get up today and be mediocre or get up today and to be great. And I'm going to try to get up today and be great. And I may end up in a mediocre spot, but it's not because of lack of trying. And I think that's something that really stuck with me.
It's awesome. A good mantra to have too. You read a lot about disruption, and I'm
Mhm.
wondering what was the most personal disruption that you've experienced and one that just didn't just change you, but changed your strategy?
Yeah, it was actually I wrote about it in a book a couple books ago. I wrote about this story and I wasn't planning to write about it. It just kind of happened. It made sense for what I was working on. So years ago, Ty, to put it in perspective, my wife and I owned a consulting practice. We started it back in 2001 and we sold it in 2012. So we were acquired in 2012. But along that way, we built it from a desk in our upper room at our house, kind of above the garage, to a place with four offices around the country and a really great, group of employees, a really great group of clients. And I noticed along the way, I didn't notice it till in retrospect, but quite frankly, I started to shift my wife from being my wife to being my business partner more and more and more. And we had kids, and we were just so busy doing that. And we were always just going 100 miles an hour, like many people are. And one time I was coming back to, we lived in Louisville at the time. I was traveling back to Louisville from Washington, D.C. I'd been at one of our offices and I was flying back in. And the whole plan was I was going to come back in the early afternoon, drive home, grab my wife. We were going to go to an event that evening. And was going to come home around the afternoon. Turned out I stayed a little bit later for meetings, caught a later flight. I thought no big deal. I called my wife and said, "Hey, I'm running late. I'll just meet you at the event." Typical way I was doing things. And we got to the event, and I could tell she wasn't too happy with me. And that night, we were driving home in separate cars because she had to drive herself to the event, and I'd driven myself from the airport. And as I was driving home, I looked down, I have like no gas in my tank, literally the lights on. So I get out to put gas in the tank, and it's this kind of rural gas station, and there was no overhead cover. And as soon as I started to fill up the car with gas, the skies opened up and just downpoured on me. So I'm literally driving the car running out of fuel and get caught in the rainstorm with no umbrella. And I get in the car and I drive back home. And as I pull into my driveway, the garage door goes up before I pushed the button, and my wife is standing there, and she said, "We need to talk about our relationship." And it was one of those situations where, you know, weeks turned to months, months turned to a couple of years of just really tough times for us. But it was partly one of those situations where I just was way off kilter on what was really most important,
Mm.
and in doing so, just not did not treat her and see it in myself the way I should have. So I think that that was something like, as a life lesson, you have to learn your way through it. We're still married together. We're still together. It's been 35 years of marriage, so we figured our way through it, but it was tough. And I just think sometimes we take for granted the most important relationships in our life. So I didn't have a word for it, but now I would say I needed to disrupt that relationship.
How did you do that? Like break that down for us because thank you for sharing something so personal. And I want to know how you worked through it as much as you're comfortable to share, obviously, but that's a hard thing. And I think a lot of us fall into that trap. So what's a practical way that you would coach somebody through a situation like that?
Well, I'll say first of all, I did probably dealt with it in all the wrong ways. I probably didn't do a very good job dealing with it, um, denying that we were having problems, or um, probably even if I was saying outwardly that it was my fault, probably inwardly I was thinking it was her fault. Probably a bunch of things like that. But for me, it was a matter of really trying to reassess where am I going in life and who do I want with me and what really is most important. And recognizing, I had somebody tell me this years later, he said, you have to realize you have five fingers, and he referred to them as like relationships. So when you're growing up, it's all about you,
Mm.
and then maybe at some point it's about you and your work and you and your impact in the world, you and your team, things like that. Then if you're lucky enough to find a partner in life, it'll be about you, your work, and your partner in life. And then if you have children or grow a family, that's you, your partner, your work in life, and your family. And then ultimately it might be your legacy. And what he was saying was the idea of like, don't confuse one partner with the other. And I had confused my work with my wife, and so it just took a little while to kind of unravel that. And it was I say it's a couple of years. It was a couple tough years
Mm.
of, you don't. Stephen Covey used to say you don't talk yourself out of something, you behave yourself into. So it was me going from denying that there was a problem to me blaming that was a problem to realizing, hey, I'm a big part of this problem, to me saying, okay, well, in order for me to reset and fix that problem, I've got to say no to some things that have kind of been part of my identity. So I kind of had to figure my way through that. But ultimately, this is 15, 20 years ago now. Ultimately, I look back at it and go, it was the best decision I made, but it just required me to change.
And there's that word again, change/disruption.
Yeah.
So I heard you say you essentially built a business from the ground up. And
Mhm.
obviously that too is met with a lot of change and disruption in addition to the relationship issues that you mentioned. I'm wondering what is something that happened that changed the trajectory of the business for you and that you saw later as something that happened for you rather than to you.
Oh yeah, there's a lot in the business. We started, like I said, I above the garage in our house. I spent the first part of my career, as you mentioned, in the Army. So I did the Army Ranger thing, and then went to a firm called KPMG Consulting, and I did that for a couple of years. I left KPMG, and then this business opportunity opened up. So we started doing consulting work, and it was myself and my wife, and then eventually myself and my wife and a couple people, and then we had several employees and dozens of employees and a few offices, and just kind of kept growing along the way. And it was one thing that was, I wouldn't say that it was one thing that I like had this big vision of, okay, we're going to build this business and it's going to be acquired over time. In some ways, it just, came along that way and worked out nicely for me. But there were several things along the way that we had to disrupt and rethink. And I think probably one of the biggest ones is as you're building something like that, all of a sudden it's like you have another child in your life. It's this business, and this business is, in the bed when you're going to bed at night and you're talking about the business. And when you eat breakfast in the morning together, if you're even fortunate enough to do that, you're talking about the business. And same thing at lunch and same thing at dinner. And it's like another child. And one thing that really disrupted me through the whole process of the business is as we were growing it, obviously there's things like trusting other employees with your baby, and bringing in different clients that have different expectations of you and deciding how you're going to meet those. But for us, I think the biggest thing was when we sold it. We didn't expect to sell the business. My wife and I were actually out of the country for a few months on a project, and we came back from being overseas. When I say out of the country, we started in Europe, and then we went over to Asia. We were in Malaysia and Singapore and China, and we were gone for like 3 solid months. And we came back from that trip, and a former boss of mine at KPMG, and I were just chatting it up over the winter holidays. And he said, "Wait a minute, you've been gone for 3 months?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "And your employees haven't quit?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Your customers haven't quit?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you want to sell your company? Talk to my boss." And his boss was looking to acquire a company. So they came along and bought us. So that was an interesting experience, just really disruptive. And I remember the day we handed over the keys to the new owners, it was a really interesting thing. We're in this meeting with our team. Most of our people were there. We were down in Florida for a meeting, and then in walk the new owners, and they kind of take the keys from us and thank us, and everybody claps, and we walk out of the room. We're in the hallway going, "Wow, this is a weird feeling. Like it's exciting. It's also kind of scary in a way." But it was really good for us to go through that process. But I would say in many ways we kind of gave birth to that child and then watched that child go and leave the home and go do something better.
That's awesome. Isn't that the dream, essentially?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and you said fear and excitement together in the same sentence, which makes me happy because that's kind of one of my comfort languages with changing your fear into excitement with what you do in your head. And I don't mean to lead the witness here, but I do have a
yeah.
question that kind of speaks to that, which is when things fall apart, like things feel scary and disrupted, what separates those who stabilize from those who spiral?
I don't know if I'm the I mean, I studied a lot, so I don't want to say I know the answer, but I've seen some good answers. I would think that part of it happens long before the disruption comes along. So I
Mm.
taught at Vanderbilt for years. I taught leading business through times of crisis, and occasionally I had sections where it would be very guest speaker driven. And there was this guest speaker who came in one time. He was the CEO of American Airlines. So you can imagine there's 25 kids in the room, students in the room, and in walks Doug Parker, the CEO of American Airlines. And he comes in with Sarah Nelson, the president of the Flight Attendants Association. So you have labor and management coming in together to talk to the students. And there's a line that Doug said to me that really to the room that really stuck with me. He said, "A crisis is never the time to start making introductions." And what he meant by that is you better know the players, know the other airline leaders, know the people in labor, know the people in know the legislators before something goes awry. And same is true, I think, in all of our lives. Before the disruption hits, we need to know the other players, starting with player number one, which is you. So why are you here? Where are you trying to go? What do you value? What are the most important relationships in your life? All of these type of things. I think we need to be thinking about those things nearly daily, if not daily. I try to now, especially since I've gone through my ups and downs in life too, like all of us have. And so I think like knowing yourself is really really critical before the disruption hits. And if you don't know yourself before the disruption hits, try to get to know yourself real quick. Really figure out what matters to you, because the first step we found in our research around disruption is that the kind of I'll say the smart people, the positive disruptors in the world, the one who say, "Okay, I could take this disruption and turn it into something good." Those are the people who don't just react, but they discern. So something happens, and Ty, a disruption can be anything that stops you in your tracks. So it can be something small and unique to you, like the results of a medical test. And that medical test, by the way, could be good results. Like, hey, the cancer is in remission. That's disruptive. Or we found cancer. That's disruptive. They can be ubiquitous, like COVID, and everybody has to deal with COVID. They can be a new project opportunity that you're excited about, or the loss of a job. It can be just a change in your family situation. Maybe you have a child and they go off to school, or they do something. So we're dealt with we deal with these disruptions all the time. But we found the most effective people don't just react. They step back and they say, okay, I'm going to think this thing through and decide what should I do in this moment. Should I like lean into the change? Should I pull back and say that's interesting, but not right now? Should I move out on my own? Should I move out with other people? And it isn't just they're not just shooting from the hip. They're really thinking through what role should I take on, and recognizing that even if they have a natural tendency to be the type of person who goes after the change or says no to the change or whatever it might be, that's only one factor in the entire equation, my natural tendency. The next one is like, what's the situation calling for me to do? Which one's going to allow me to throw that fuel on the fire within myself? And from there, I choose which role to take on. That's a really critical thing. And then we also found that these positive disruptors we studied, they're really good at leaning into their strengths, as opposed to kind of trying to deal with just the weaknesses or try to figure out like how do I make this work when I don't have XYZ. They're thinking about I have ABC now that I don't have XYZ. So I spent 2.5 years studying this concept of disruption at Vanderbilt. That's what turned into a book with James Patterson on the topic of disrupt everything and win. And the idea here was you have disruptive strengths. Everybody listening to this podcast has disruptive strengths. We found 16 of them in the research. So they're everything from some people are really good at looking deeply to uncover insights. Like they look at something, they go, what's going on here? I saw something similar someplace else. What's the insight here? And an insight is something that few people know and it's valuable.
Mm.
If everybody knows it, that's not really an insight. If only a few people know it, but it's not valuable, like I know my favorite movie, that's not an insight. But if I know something that is valuable and few people know it, that's an insight. So what's the insight here? Some people are really good at that. Other people have great instincts. Some people are really good at casting a vision. Some people can stand firmly in the face of doubters, and the list goes on and on. Now, when we were doing the research, I kept thinking, I hope there's just like one or two behaviors to be a really great disruptor in the world. Like, because then it would be like the book would be like this one thing, just do this one thing. And there isn't. There's 16 of them. And guess what? Nobody had them all really well.
Mm.
And there's no perfect combination, and I've never been in a room before where I haven't described the 16 and asked people to raise their hands when they kind of self-assess, yeah, I've got that one, or yes, I've got that one. I've never met somebody who didn't have at least one or two of them. So some people really care about others. Other people are really good at listening to understand. Some people hear what isn't even said. Some people are really good at rolling their sleeves up and getting their hands dirty. These are all different examples of positive disruptor behaviors. And then ultimately, as they moved along through the process, we found that not only did they lean into their strengths and bring other people along with them, but they always started by disrupting themselves first. You're not going to fix the world until you fix yourself. You're not going to, that type of thing. Like it starts from the inside out. And they would also really get good at saying, okay, what did I learn? How can I get better? So those are kind of the four steps we found in this thing we called the disruptive loop is they discern, they behave, they achieve, and they refine.
You've learned a lot about disruption and a lot
Oh yeah.
about leadership over the course of time. And a lot of that happened not just in study, but in practice. So I'm wondering how do you stay calm under pressure? Like you've led in high stakes environments. What does it look like and how do you find that calm amidst the storm?
A couple of things on that. My faith matters to me, so that keeps me grounded in many ways. So I try to put things in perspective like that. I don't have to change the whole world. I just need to worry about my little square inch of the world out here and try to impact other people in positive ways. My purpose, but knowing why I believe I'm here is really important to me and it helps ground me. When I messed up things like with my wife and our relationship was I lost focus on those two things, which are really critical, like my faith and my purpose. I also think it's for at least me, Ty, I found that there are things in life that somebody tells me is going to be so difficult. And then I start to do it, and it's never quite as difficult as they say it's going to be. And there's also things that you're like, oh, it's going to be so easy. And I get into it, and it's never as easy as they say it's going to be. So what I realize in life is that, what, I'll take people's advice and listen to it, but then I want to get my head in there and see what's going on and be willing. My dad told me years ago, he's like, hey, if your boss or somebody ever gives you an opportunity, just say yes to it and see what you find out. And I've kind of had that bias toward action. But you're right. I mean, I spent time in the military jumping out of planes, and I was a company commander in 82nd Airborne Division. I threw people out of planes, not literally, but we would put them out of planes. I was a jump master. You're doing all that, and there's inherent risk in anything that people do. There's risk driving to work every day. But I think that to me, if you get enough reps in life, you jump out of a plane enough, or you do whatever it might be, go into the meeting and step up to the presentation board enough, you start to realize like I'm going to be okay. I got this. I can figure my way through it. And by the way, there's people around me that want to see me succeed. And that's really helpful as well. So I just feel like one of the best ways to figure out something is to give it a try. And you'll be surprised how many people will root you on along the way. And that lifts me up.
I feel that way about this podcast. I am so grateful that I have these friends that are coming on like yourself. I'm very grateful for you coming on and the people that have been watching and commenting and sharing. It's really cool because I'm literally building the rocket ship in the air. So having
Yeah.
having that support is everything. What is one leadership mistake that people make when things feel uncertain?
I think it's a couple things. I'll say two. You asked for one, but I'll say two, and they're interrelated. But I think one thing is that when things feel uncertain and kind of weighty and time feels compressed and we feel like the pressure of delivering on something, we tend to take and put more and more on our own shoulders. And there's a reason we have a team. A team is designed to make the weaknesses of one overcome the strength, excuse me, strengths of one overcome the weaknesses of another. So let's lean into each other in those moments. And I also think one of the challenges that we happens in those moments of uncertainty is not only do we leadership wise like take too much on our own shoulders, but we also we begin to question what's possible. And one thing that Patterson and I try to help people understand is yes, disruption can come along and blow things up. There's no doubt about it. Good or bad, it blows things up. And that can be hard for us because we get things just the way we want them, and then something happens. But what if we just pivot our mindset just a little bit and say, yeah, it might blow some things up, but what also if it's fertile ground for something new or something different? And helping people realize that sometimes when something gets disrupted, let's say even at the face value, it's really negative. We're like, oh gosh, I didn't expect that to happen. All of a sudden, a new path might come along or a new door might open. And that may never have opened if we didn't go through that moment. So recognizing that even the tough times are valuable, I think is a really critical thing for leaders to recognize because it helps them to help other people see it as well.
How do you do that though? Like, how do you actually start? You said we do better when we practice and you get the reps in. How do you get those reps in a way that's constructive? Because obviously we don't know when the disruptions are coming. We don't know when the change is going to happen. And the best way to handle them is to be prepared. But how do you practice? How do you work that muscle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of it is thinking like purpose and values and those things, kind of getting clear on who you are and why you're here and what you're trying to do. Another is just getting in the gym and working the muscle. And actually, Mel Robbins has a podcast, and my co-writer James Patterson went on Mel Robbins' podcast, and he came off it and he's like, you know, Patrick, we need to go back. This is when we were working on the book. We need to go back in and make it easier for people to make some of these moves. So we created what we called 27. There's 27 kind of sprinkled throughout the book. They're just little ideas. We call them 27 positive disruptor moves because oftentimes it's the hardest thing is just taking the first step or doing something, right? And or you feel like somebody else needs to do something or whatever it might be. So we give these 27 ideas. The point isn't for everybody to go do all 27 of those things right away. The point is for you to look at it and go, I could do that. Like one is put it on the table. And the idea is if you're in a meeting or a conversation or a virtual call and the air just feels heavy, something just feels wrong, just say it. Just say something feels like we're a little bit off. Normally we seem to like be better sync. Am I missing it? And usually what happens is somebody else goes, yeah, I kind of feel that too, or something's going on. So that's one, just put it on the table. Another one's own the day. Like when you get up in the morning before your feet hit the ground, think about your purpose and where you're trying to go today. People who understand that can really differentiate signal from noise, and they recognize what the signal is as opposed to all the noise in the system. Say the scary yes, that's a little bolder. So saying yes to an opportunity, saying the hard no. So these are all these little 27 things that you could do and say, you know what, as Jim says, the book isn't one size fits all in regard to read the entire book, read all the stories, and then you go and try to be those people doing all those things. No, the book is you read it, and along the way you realize, oh, I'm kind of like that person, or I've kind of done something like this. So you start to realize what you've already done, and then you realize what might be the next good step for you. And that's what we really want people to do.
Like a playbook,
Yeah, yeah. A playbook in the world where the plays are being rewritten constantly.
which is important right now more than ever before. So well done, sir. Quick before you forget, what actually matters when everything else feels unstable?
I think your why matters.
And
So
what is your why?
yeah, my purpose is to, and I spent quite a long time thinking about this, probably more than I needed to, but I wasn't sure. I don't know when you figure it out. But my why in life, I believe my purpose in life is to provide ideas and insights that will allow other people to live their great purpose. And that's why when this book project came along with James Patterson, I'm like, well, that just makes perfect sense. If I can help figure out how some people deal with disruption in positive ways and teach people about that, what's a better way than providing an idea and insight to help other people live their great purpose? So that's why when people at the university were like, you're writing a self-help type of book. I'm like, you know what? I'm writing a book. I think I have the question burning into me that I need to ask and answer.
What would you tell your 22-year-old self if you could?
Get your act together. No, I own a lot of craziness and stupid decisions I made in my life. I spent 12 years teaching at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's top. 13, 14, school in the United States, very much a global school, very well respected school. I I taught there. I ran the program of undergraduate business for years, and I dropped out of community college myself. So talk about somebody who went from rags to riches academically. I was not mature enough to make it through community college, so I joined the Army. That kind of got my head on straight, and I realized I could do some things good in life, and that happened to be a path that made sense for me. And then the more they were willing to pay for my schooling, the more I just kept going. That's how I ended up with a doctorate. And then we sold the business. I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? And I just went into teaching. So that's one of those stories like we'd be like, I can't believe that would happen. So I guess I would tell my 22-year-old self, or better yet, like my 18, 17, 18-year-old self, you need to get it together. But if you don't get it together today, hang in there. You're going to get it together over time.
You disrupted yourself to get it together
Yeah, I did. I did.
before
Well,
you even
fun.
knew like what that
Yeah,
meant.
I didn't have language for it, right? But it's funny because I I kind of left the few jobs that I had over my career. I kind of left them earlier than I needed to, which was good for me. So I got out of the military after I finished the company command job in the 82nd. And the reason I did that was because everybody told me, oh, after being a captain in the Army, everything's more like staff positions and stuff like that. In other words, these are your best times. Well, I was like, well, why am I going to stay around for the not so best times? So I got out after that. And then we sold the business. I wasn't planning to sell it, but it came along and the opportunity showed up. And then I wasn't going to necessarily leave the university because I figured if I leave, there's going to be 10,000 people waiting for my job. But when the opportunity came and said, well, you spend your 20s jumping out of planes, running around the Army, you spend your 30s building a business, spend your 40s teaching somebody, let's spend your 50s changing the world. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to quit the university and focus on that. So yeah, it's been a good ride.
Well, uh, that's easier said than done for people, I think, to leave before it's time. So I'm
Mm.
wondering what the first thing someone should do is if they when they realize that the life they planned isn't aligned with the one they're living.
Well, that's the first thing is when they realize it. And then the second thing I would be is to say, okay, what are you going to do with it? And it doesn't mean you have to go. My path is I quit jobs probably when I was on the top and in a good position, and that was just a choice I made. So each one was kind of like a 10-year stint. So it wasn't like flip it like 30 days or something. It was 10 years. But each one of them it made sense to kind of move on. I felt like I gave to the organization what I could give and I'd gotten what I could have gotten. Like that relationship had gotten really strong and it was time to move on to the next thing. And for me, the chapter changes were really clear when it was time to make those changes. So I would just say that everybody's journey is different. So some people are more comfortable with ambiguity than others are. I'm pretty comfortable with ambiguity. I just like the idea of like I'm going to put myself in the driver's seat and try to figure this thing out. Other people might not be the same way, or I've been fortunate over the years. I didn't grow up with much means. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and my parents probably sacrificed a lot just to let me go to community college, and that didn't turn out too well. But nobody in my neighborhood had gone to college or things like that. Just wasn't the path everybody had taken there. So my point being is now over the course of time, I had some means that would allow me to do certain things. So what I'm saying is like, as I say this, like I'm not telling everybody go quit your job or pivot if you're in the wrong direction, like, throw it to the wind and see what happens because everybody's not in that spot to do that. But what I am saying is that even when you feel like you have a lot going on and there's no space to do anything else. Sometimes, if you're clear about why you're here and what you're trying to do, suddenly a little bit more energy will come out to do that other thing. When I started the business above the garage with my wife, we were technically moonlighting. Like I had a job and then I'd work on this project with her. Now we call it, these days, they would say a side hustle.
Mm.
When I went from after we sold our business, I started off by teaching part-time at the university and then get a full-time job. When I joined the military at 17, I joined the National Guard and then joined full-time Army. So every one of them, I kind of took an intermediate step to help me get there. And I think there's a little bit of saying like, okay, you don't have to do it all, but you do need to move in a direction that'll make you feel more fulfilled and a direction where you'll make a better contribution in life. And you owe it to yourself to do that. In our research on it, we write in the book about these four fundamental facts of disruption. And the fourth one is that your time here is finite. Make it count in ways that matter. And it's true. Your time on this listening to this conversation is finite. Now listen intently, pay attention. There may be something good there for you. Your time with your family in its current configuration. I know that you have a family tie, and you're watching. I'm watching your kids grow up, and there's a lot going on. But that's going to change. I have two adult children now, but I have grandchildren, right? So that changes. So we need to make it count in every phase of life. Your time in your organization or whatever you're building. This current version of this podcast is what it is right now. It'll be something else in the future as it evolves and changes. So let's make it count. And I just really feel we owe it to ourselves and those around us on the journey with us to make it count in ways that matter. James Patterson said, James Patterson had no reason to write this book with me. He is literally, if you don't know him, folks, I don't know where you've been, but he's the world's best-selling author. He sold 475 million book copies. I mean, that's a massive number, right?
Easy.
There's only two people on planet Earth who are billionaires from writing books, J.K. Rowling and James Patterson, which is phenomenal. And why would he take the time to write this book that's in a genre he hasn't written in before? And he says it this way. He said, and he heard the expression one time that said, "My time here is finite. What can I do most beautifully?" And
Mm.
he felt like this particular book, giving some people an understanding of the opportunity that lies out there and a chance for them to live their good lives is worth the effort.
I think people underestimate themselves. And I'm
Oh
wondering
yeah.
what what do people underestimate most when times are uncertain?
Well, I think it depends which emotions surfacing for them. And I'm not. This isn't necessarily my area of expertise to think like what they concern most, but my thoughts might be some people are thinking fear and anxiety. Some people are fear, don't want to let go of something. There's lots of things that process. So I would say that one thing we underestimate is the importance of those emotions
Mm.
and allowing ourselves enough time to process them. Doesn't mean we freeze and stay there forever. But if I tell you the first step that we found people do in the face of disruption is to discern what to do, that means that they spend a little bit of time processing through the emotions. So give yourself some space to think about it. If I told you about some new project opportunity, some of you might be excited, but a little fearful. Some of you might be scared, but a little bit excited. Some of you might be anxious. I mean, there's right all different ways we show up to this thing. So give yourself some space to do it and kind of think it through and give yourself a little bit of grace to work that out. And I think the other thing that we don't necessarily do very well for ourselves is being a leader and leading ourselves or leading anyone else. It all begins with self-awareness and such a critical thing, which means that we need to know ourselves. We need to see ourselves for who we really are, which for some of us, we don't, I probably don't either. I have to work on it too. Have good clarity on that. Like have people in our lives who speak the truth to us, people who challenge us, people who encourage us. We need all those voices in our lives. At the same time, we need to own what it is we're good at. And I'm the youngest of five kids from a Catholic house. I mean, I got more guilt than you can imagine sometimes, and I don't always own, what my strengths are. Sometimes I've had to like learn to grow into them a little bit. So I think that part of it is like let yourself process the emotion. It's okay to work your way through that, and also to own what you're good at. As opposed to kind of if somebody says you did something really, really well and it makes you feel uncomfortable, just say thank you and move on, as opposed to say, well, no, here's why I got so lucky. No, no, you didn't get lucky. I mean, there may have been a little luck, but you also were ready when it showed up.
Got blessed is what you got.
Yeah.
Talk to me about something you do to ground yourself. How do you stay, self-awareness has a lot to do with self-love and being conscious of what's going on in your own head and honestly in your own heart. What do
Mhm.
you do to stay grounded in the present?
Um, since COVID, my wife and I started walking in the mornings, and we walk a lot every morning. Like this morning, we walked 3 miles or something. So if you're able to do that and you have somebody to do it with, or even on your own when I'm traveling, I'll do it myself. Going out, walking, getting outside, spending some time with her. It's not a competitive thing. It's just for hanging out, walking with the dogs is great. I am a big outdoorsy type of person. I like doing things outdoors. I've hiked Mount Kilimanjaro with my son and walked on glaciers and places and just done lots of cool things. So for me, getting out, being physically active is really important. That's not everybody's thing, which is fine. Just find your thing. I also like to read. So I actually am like the most, I have my two hobbies are like the most generic things somebody would say on a resume or on LinkedIn. I like reading and hiking. I mean, but I do like those two things. So for me, it's a couple of those type of things kind of keep you grounded. And it's so easy to spend a lot of time on social media. And guess what? Those aren't real worlds. That's just not real what's going on out there. And stuff you're comparing yourself to out there isn't real either. I spend plenty of time on it too, more than I should. But doing stuff that's real is just very different. I remember remember thinking about this when I did jump out of airplanes in the Army. We would jump out at 800 feet, and 800 feet's not really that high. It might sound high, like 800 feet, but so we jump static line tie where you're already attached to the airplane. So as you jump out, the parachute gets extracted from the pack on your back. It's being pulled out by itself because there's a lanyard back to the plane, and it called static line. And the thing is, you jump at 800 feet, and when you jump out of the plane, it should take 4 seconds for the parachute to open. And if it doesn't open in 4 seconds, you got about 3 seconds to recover and get your spare pulled out before the parachute before you would hit the ground. And I think there's this thing that happens like when you're up at the altitude of 800 feet and you're standing in the door waiting to go, everything looks so peaceful and serene. And then even if you have a nice full parachute, you're still coming down pretty quickly. They're not like the sport ones. We hit pretty hard. Like you don't stand when you land, you crash into the ground pretty good. Um, it's interesting how things look differently when the ground rushes up. So to me, going outside and getting my hands in the real world is different than social media sometimes is like looking at the world from 800 feet.
Mm.
And going outside is a little bit like getting closer to the ground where stuff gets real. And I just like to kind of keep that in perspective.
Well, it's unreal to some people to be jumping out of planes, but
Yeah, but that's their, everybody's got their thing. Mine just
yeah.
happened to be that. It could have been something else, but maybe if I did really well in community college, I never would have done that.
Well,
But
I've done roller coasters enough to know that 800 feet is actually not very high because
yeah,
you've got to go from that peaceful, serene moment before you jump out of the plane to being very aware of your surroundings very quickly if you're going to survive the fall.
yeah,
So, that's a really cool thing too. Picture your 80th birthday for me, would you, Patrick? Like, think
yeah.
about. I often think about our friend and comrade Dave Hollis, who passed away a couple of years ago. He had this idea in his head about legacy and what he wanted his 80th birthday to look like. So I have been thinking about this question, and it's the people that are there, but what do you want them to say about you?
Well, I hope that they would say that I'm a genuine guy who has all sorts of, you know, he's done some good stuff and messed some stuff up and learned a lot of lessons along the way, but my intent was good. And if I made a wrong, I tried to turn it into a right. I was a good friend you could trust and would be there for you, a good partner in business. There was this guy when my mom passed away about 14 years ago now. Uh, this was before we sold our business, right around the time we sold our business, 14, 15 years ago. And it just so happened my mom passed away. They lived in Chicago, and we went to the funeral and all those oddities. This that uncomfortable feeling when you lose somebody in your life and you go through the visitations and the funerals, whatever your religious beliefs or ceremonies might be. Ours was visitation and then the funeral. I came out of the funeral, the funeral at the church, and I stepped outside. I was standing on a stoop, probably about 5 steps up from the ground, and out in front of me, people had come out of the church and they were poured out and just kind of standing around, milling around, saying hi to each other. And I looked out there, and one of my employees from the company I had just sold had traveled out on his own dime from Washington, D.C. to be at my mom's funeral. No big announcement that he was coming, none of that type of stuff. I just looked out and saw him standing there. And I just kind of like go, I hope there's a lot more people that would do that for me. It doesn't mean they have to travel to my 80th birthday party. It just means like that they would value something about me enough that they'd be willing to make that journey. And hopefully they would do it because they felt like I would do the same for them. So I just want to be that kind of guy that's like real and tries to do good things and has occasionally some smart stuff to say that helps people in their journey.
Now that reminds me of a story from the struggle, let's see. Hold on, let's find the book. The Gift of Struggle with Bobby Herrera.
Hmm.
I'm fortunate and blessed to have a signed copy, and in his first chapter is a story about Mr. Teague, and he's the fellow that got back on the bus for Bobby. Bobby and his brother grew up in a house where they had limited resources, and their mom had packed them a bag lunch after their game, and the whole team got off the bus to go get their celebratory dinner. And Mr. Teague came back and said, guys, it would make me so happy to give you dinner tonight. Come join us. And that story, that moment honestly changed everything about Bobby's life. I'm wondering if there's anybody like that got back on the bus for you.
Yeah, there's lots of people that have done that. I kind of occasionally, spend some time reflecting on them. One's kind of interesting to me is when I was in the military. They have this thing, Ty, that happens like when you're. So I was initially enlisted in the military, then I became an officer, and as an officer, as a second lieutenant, you tend to be a platoon leader. in the infantry. And then as a first lieutenant, you become a company executive officer. And then as a captain, you become a company commander. That's just kind of the natural progression. And usually between the first lieutenant and the captain time frame, you go to another school. So you go to another training and then they send you to a different unit. In my case, that's not what happened. I finished being a company executive officer as a first lieutenant. I was getting promoted to captain. And my battalion commander at the time, who had been a lieutenant colonel, you don't need to know the rank structure, just a couple more ranks above me, went out of his way to walk across the street to another unit and tell them, this guy doesn't need to go to advanced training right now. Make him one of your company commanders, which is like a huge, a big deal. It was Lloyd Austin, who became the Secretary of Defense, is who that person was at the time, was Lieutenant Colonel Lloyd Austin. So I've had a few people like that that have been so kind to like go, you know what, this guy's ready for this or that, even if I didn't feel like I was ready to do it. I didn't solicit it. I didn't look for it. I probably didn't even feel like I was ready. But he, as you said, got back on the bus, walked across the street for me, and did that. And I'm pretty involved in a I mentioned that drum and bugle corps thing at the beginning, and that instructor Don. I have some friends who they do a fundraiser every year, and I'm on the board of their group. And every year we go to the big drum corps competition in Indianapolis. It's everything you can imagine it would be, folks. And we go to this thing, and we do a big fundraiser, and we sponsor kids to march the next year. And I just think that's like, to me, that's my getting back on the bus moment for other people. And I think it's important for us to do that type of thing to kind of carry it forward a little bit. But as far as my 80th birthday party, I hope people come like they did to my mom's funeral, and they just celebrate my life, and also just love on each other while they're there.
That's beautiful. Well, I want to know more about this drumming, the drum and bugle corps.
I was the bugling side, so I played the trumpet. Yeah.
That's awesome. My son Carter plays the trumpet. My son Connor plays the trombone. And I'll tell you, did other kids in your household play instruments too? Okay.
Nope.
So it's
Nope.
just you making all the
It's just
noise.
me. Yeah. I'm the only one in the military too. I carved my own path. Yeah. So imagine like marching band
Yeah.
in the United States, we have marching band, like football games and stuff like that. Imagine that, but it's only marching band. You do one performance, you perfect it all year long and travel in the summer months to compete. And it's like very, very, I mean, high level of proficiency. What these kids put into it is crazy. I mean, they pay to be there. They don't get paid. And it's in there between 13 and 21 years old, age out at 21. So it's a really kind of it's the thing, like anything else. You get into it, it's an entire world unto itself. And it's just one of those type of things.
Well, music is one of my love languages, so I want to talk more about music if you don't mind. Do
Sure.
you have a song that you put on when things are hard and you need to remind yourself who you are?
I don't know if I have a song. I do have songs for kind of genres for different moods and stuff. I mean, there's some things that pop is kind of fun and kind of gives you upbeat. For me, when I listen to like a pop song, I tend to listen to either songs that I would have listened to when I was a kid, which I was not. I'm not this old. I wasn't like a Beatles kid growing up. In fact, I was the kid who was like mad that I wasn't born earlier, so I would have been around when the Beatles were there. So I wasn't there, but I like the Beatles. So like in the 70s and 80s, I would listen to them. And then my kids, obviously some of the pop songs that they listen to kind of still stick in my head because it takes me back to those moments doing silly stuff in the car or whatever it might be. But I like classical music a lot. My wife's on the opera board here in Nashville, Tennessee, so we tend to go to a lot of opera together. I have some friends who do some really great Christian music. I'm good friends with some folks. I live in Nashville, so music kind of all around me. If I want to get charged up, I'll like listen to like Holt's The Planet or something that's like really like driving and exciting. So yeah, I've just different music for different times. And what I like about music is just the nostalgia of it, that it brings me back to a different time, or it can forge new memories going forward too. Like you have two grandkids, so now I'm learning new kid songs that I didn't even know existed the last 20 years.
How old are your grandkids?
They'll be 3 and 1 next month.
Are they so fun? Do you love
Oh
spending time
yeah,
with them?
yeah, yeah. Two little girls, and they live like 2 miles from me, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, I love that. You get to be very present with them then.
Yeah. The older one, the 3-year-old, says that I'm her best friend. And she's been saying that for about 9 months. And my daughter was like, how did you teach her that? I'm like, I didn't teach her that. She just says, Papa, best friend. Isn't
Patrick, that's adorable.
that sweet? Yeah, yeah. I mean, gosh, you asked me what I want for my 80th birthday party. I already got it. I'm only 57.
I
I'm her
know.
best friend.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. So speaking of the 80th birthday party, this is kind of applicable there too. But if you had a microphone then now in the past, doesn't matter, pick your time, but if you had a microphone for the world to hear one thing, one message from Patrick, what would it be?
Um, I think I'd probably lean into the stuff I've been doing recently around, the everyone is disrupted in life. We all are, but some of us choose to be positive disruptors who use that disruption for progress and innovation and growth. And I think I would tell people that like, you've got that person within you too.
Mm.
The world needs you, so go disrupt for good.
Now I have a couple quick hitting kind of questions, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
What is something about this season of your life that you don't want to forget?
Well, I would probably go back to my grandchildren and things like that on the personal perspective, personal
Being
basis,
a
or my life.
BFF with a 3-year-old?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what are we gonna? I don't want to forget that. From a work perspective, I think that so when we were going through the process of writing the book, one thing we decided to do, we had a research team at Vanderbilt for 2.5 years studying this. We're interviewing people, and Jim challenged me, Patterson challenged me to go out and just speak about the book, even when we're just trying to put it together early on. Like really, it took us. It was a 9, 10 month long just outline process, right? Just to get the outline right, and then a couple of years of research beyond that. And the whole time we were doing that, Jim would say, just go out and talk to people about it and see what resonates, what language stands out. And I was doing some presentations. In fact, the first group I spoke to was 800 people talking about this project that was just getting started, which is kind of like, what were you thinking? But I happened to tell that day about a disruption in my life where I said, I'll make it really quickly, but I was looking at my different roles in life. Somebody asked me to think about my roles in life and pick a few of them and kind of assess how you're doing. So I thought about, father and project manager, team leader at work, owner of the business, all that type of stuff. And I also thought about son, S-O-N. And I thought, I'm not doing a terrible job as a son, but I'm not doing a great job as a son. I'm kind of in the middle. I'd like to do a better job. So at the time I was living in Louisville, Kentucky, and my parents lived in Chicago still. And our ritual was really a ritual. I would call them once a week, kind of obligation, call them once a week just to check in. And every conversation was basically the same. What's the weather? What's the traffic? What are you doing this week? And they do the same thing on their end, and we'd hang up. And as I was looking at the my role of son, I thought I could do a better job than that. So I start writing down questions to ask them before the call, or I'd travel for work and I'd send them a postcard as I was traveling, just little things like that. No big things, just little things like that. And so I'm telling this story to the audience, and I said, well, right around that same time when my mom passed away, I remember sitting at my dad's house later that day, and I said to my wife, I said, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I disrupted the relationship. I didn't even say the word disrupted, but I kind of changed the relationship. And my wife said to me, well, you're still a son, there's your dad. And people listening to this might get it, but my mom and dad were very different in that my mom was the yes person and my dad was a no person. Like, mom, can we go there? Yes. Can we get this? Yes. My dad, no, no, no. Just that kind of personality. So I was thinking, there's no way this guy's going to say he wants to do anything with me right now. So I walk over to him and I said, Dad, I said, hey, Dad, I travel a lot for work. You want to come with me sometime? And he said, where are you going? And I said, next week I'm going to Topeka, Kansas. And my dad goes to Topeka, Kansas with me. And then he goes to Florida with me and he goes on these trips with me. And I started to like see him differently, right? He's not the no guy necessarily. He's a guy who at the time had 5 children, like 3 jobs, trying to make the house work. And we just started seeing each other differently. So I think I tell that story to people. And when I told it one time to somebody and it just kind of kept resonating. I kept telling and sharing that story. And and then we ended up putting that one particular story in the book. And I think that it's really important, like to realize like that hey, you might disrupt yourself first, but then you're going to disrupt some important relationships in life. And that was really one thing that stood out as we were writing the book and working on it.
Wow. I am touched by that story. I think that that's really neat that you got to travel then with your dad and learn
I know,
about
right?
him. I mean, yeah, and that's like a dream, honestly.
Yeah,
And
it is. It is wild.
what is the most interesting thing you learned from him when you got to know him better?
It was interesting to learn, and still is today. He's 94 now. To He likes to talk about his work, like what he did as, and then we never really heard him talk about work when I was growing up. He worked for the phone company in Illinois. He installed phones, like underground and in people's homes, and that for 38 years. He never really talked that much about it. But then when he started hearing me talk about work and leadership, he would tell me about his time and what he would learned along the way. And that was really endearing. I really find it endearing. I love when he tells me some of those stories because I never heard them before. And the reality was he had a yearning to tell the story, I just hadn't put myself in the position to be the ears for it. So when I was all of a sudden in a different spot, he would just talk about it. It was kind of fun to hear him talk about things like that. And so yeah, that would be one thing.
That's something we can all learn from, Patrick,
Oh yeah.
because everybody has a story to share. And can't, I mean, scientifically speaking, probably they really want to share it. They might just not have the right vocabulary or the right circumstances, or even they just need to know that somebody cares enough to listen.
And it's okay to.
And
It's
it's
okay to tell
okay.
the story. Yeah.
Right. Please tell
Yeah.
the story. I mean, like, takeaway moment right there is just ask the question, disrupt the situation enough to ask the question, and then just listen. I
Yeah.
mean, never like you just it's amazing to me how valuable that I mean, honestly, that was a great story, but how valuable that is because your dad you had a you disrupted the relationship for good and you took the things from it, but you also disrupted your dad for like I'm certain that you changed your dad's perspective a little bit and that's a really cool full circle moment as just as a human.
Yeah, I agree. The book itself, Disrupt Everything and Win, is it there were 350 people we interviewed in the research. About 32 of the stories made it into the book. So
Oh
every
wow.
chapter starts with a story. It's a James Patterson book. He's known for writing thrillers and fast page turning things. So every story clips along pretty quickly. Hopefully, we leave you wanting to know more about that person. Go find out yourself some more about that person. Some people are household names like actors or professional athletes. A lot of them are unsung heroes. You've never heard of these people, but you should. And what we're trying to do is use their story ultimately to help you write your story. When Patterson talked to my students, he would start off with the question every time, "Are you living a good life?" And he'd say, "I know that sounds like a simple question, but the answer is not simplistic. Everybody defines that for themselves." And then he said, "Or do you feel like you're on one treadmill only to get on another treadmill, only to get on another treadmill?" And then he goes, "I'm living a good life, and let me tell you how I did it." And it's his life. It's a good life. It's got its ups and its downs. He was engaged to someone in his 30s who ended up having brain cancer, and she passed away. You wouldn't wish that on anyone, but he figured out how to continue on. We're really good at human beings. At Right now in Nashville, where I live, we had a bad ice storm, and there's trees knocked down everywhere. It's just kind of funny. We're like ants. We just drag the trees out to the curb. Somebody comes along to pick them up. We start rebuilding, and we keep going along. Just like if you step on an anthill, they immediately start rebuilding. And we have this amazing capacity to work through tough things. And that's what he wanted them to learn. That's what we want people to learn as they read it. The book is not called Change Everything. Isn't called Change Everything because sometimes the most disruptive thing you can do is say no to change. And that's what we want people to realize is just own that choice.
Amidst all the disruptions that you've repurposed into something good, what part of yourself are you most grateful that you never let go of?
My humor. I don't know if it's shown up on this call today, but I think I have a pretty good sense of humor. As the youngest of five kids, everybody was really witty and fast with the jokes at the dinner table, and it was almost like a survival skill to be good at it, and like form alliances, and in those moments, like whatever it might be, all pretty lighthearted. And I just feel like I keep my humor with me, and when I'm out talking to audiences, because I get to do that a lot these days, um, I think we do a lot of laughing, and that's important.
It is. It's very good for you.
So I don't want to lose that.
That's awesome. I don't think you will. And I can vouch Patrick is funny. If anybody doesn't think he's funny, he's funny.
I'm funny. I'm
He's
hilarious.
he's
I'm a
so
riot.
funny. He's a riot. Quick before you forget, Patrick, what matters to you most right now?
Um, Well, my faith probably matters most to me. Yeah, definitely matters most to me. My relationship with my wife is in such a good place these days that we've been each other's best friends like teenage years. But yeah, we're in such a grounded place, and I just that she matters more to me than anybody else on planet Earth for sure.
There's been so many good takeaways that I can't even kind of summarize them, but I'm hearing a lot of things about knowing to just keep moving, keep showing up, keep going when things feel hard, and there's something good that will come from it. You don't have to overhaul everything. You can just overhaul one thing. So before I wrap, Patrick, I want to ask you what is one thing that you wish I had asked that I didn't?
You did a really good job. So I don't know
Oh,
if there's any one thing I'm thinking about that I wish you'd asked.
well, thank
I
you.
think that I don't know if you would have asked this necessarily, but one thing that like comes out sometimes is we hear so much about resilience and being resilient and building resilience. And I'm here to share that resilience doesn't happen in a 1 hour workshop. You don't put people in a room and say, come out being more resilient. You got it. Resilience happens when people do what we talk about from those we studied. When you hit a moment of disruption and you discern what to do and you make a choice and you lean into your strengths and start to take some action and you deliver results, good or bad, and then you learn from those results. And you go through that 3 or 4 or 5 times with different disruptions in your life. And all of a sudden, something that 2 years ago or a year ago it had knocked you down. Now you're like, I could step right over that. And that's how resilience is built. And what I saw with the people we studied, there's a lady, for example, who she's from Copenhagen, Denmark. She's a server at a cafe, travels to India with some friends and sees some street children living on the street. And it really touches her. Today, there's 1,600 kids who live in the orphanages that she runs.
Oh,
She
wow.
didn't go from meeting two kids on the street to 1,600 children. She went from meeting two kids on the street to going back to Denmark saying, what am I going to do with this? And telling everybody about it. Some people of which said, okay, that'll go away. Stop, worry about what's going on here, not about what's going around thousands of miles away. And then she decided, well, I'm going to make another trip and then another trip and another trip. And what seeing them on the street, which was massively disruptive 12 years earlier, is now just she's used to that. That's common. She can move beyond that and kept getting better and bringing other people into the conversation with her. That's how we build resilience, is we just keep on keeping on. And we also realize sometimes when this path is not the right path, we get off the path. And it's really hard. There's a one of the things that we found is a disruptive behavior that people have is some people are really good at letting go of good in order to get something great. And
Mm.
some of us just aren't. I guarantee you there's somebody listening to this podcast who's in a relationship that's not even good, and you're still hanging on to it. So sometimes you have to say, you know what, I'm gonna let go of that and get something better, or at least be willing to risk it a little bit by putting some boundaries in place, or by re-examining that relationship and saying, you know what, we should disrupt this a little bit for good, as opposed to just why would we hold on to something that's not great if we can get something better for ourselves and others.
It's fascinating to me because you mentioned building resilience over time and through practice. I was going to ask this, and I'd take it wherever you'd like, but
Yeah.
do you think resilience is built through crisis or revealed through crisis?
Yeah, it's a good question. It might be, I don't know necessarily the answer. I guess what you said, but I think you're probably right with the word revealed. It's probably revealed and reinforced so that it feels like it's building on itself in a way. Like we just
Mhm.
become more capable, not more capable. We reveal more of our capability to do X, Y, Z. And you look at some people throughout human history have had to deal with, or even people listening to this conversation, some of you, what you have to deal with. If I had to face what you faced, it would just might bury me, but you figured out how to deal with it. And we talk about in the book the idea that we're wired to disrupt, which is an interesting idea, I think, because neuroscientists would tell you that we like things consistently. Our brain likes to conserve energy, and it does. But at the same time, our brains can be really creative, and we can do things that no other animal in the animal kingdom can do. So we say you're wired to disrupt because you got a big brain that can come up with really ingenious ways of dealing with things. You're also wired to disrupt because you have experiences where you've got knocked down and gotten back up, and you learn from those experiences. And if you were to chart out your life, make a line for your life with the ups and downs of life over the course of time, we've all had down times and we've all had up times, and they're very can be very relative. Like what I consider a downtime, somebody else might be like, that's no big deal. Somebody else might be like, that's horrific. Whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. It's my story. But I've got my ups and my downs in life. And when you really think about your ups and downs in life, sometimes those low points of the down, you don't realize that there's a high point coming not that far away. And the ability to survive the low points, learn from them, and move forward to the next high point, that's that idea of just revealing, using your words, our ability to accomplish things over time and be more resilient.
You don't need the staircase, you just need the next step.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And as people read the book, Patterson's funny. He says, if they read the book and they don't like this story about this person, skip it. Who cares? It didn't speak to them. Keep moving. If you got this chapter and you're like, I've got this pretty good, then skip it. You don't have to read every word. Just read the ones that work for you. We want this our book to help you.
Well, I think the question that I'd be curious to ask anybody listening to think about after this conversation, it's where in my life am I resisting disruption and when might it actually be redirection toward that next step? Like what and then what is that simple next step? So I'm so grateful for our conversation today, Patrick. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with me. And we'll see you guys next time on Quick Before You Forget. Thank you for being here with me today on Quick Before You Forget. Please like, share, and subscribe as that helps the show so much, and I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time on Quick Before You Forget.